Thank you so much for being a part of our study in Deuteronomy. I'm laughing because Rudy just said to me, "What are you thinking about today?" And I said, "Well, let's get started." So, surprise, Rudy, here we go. We're going to skip. We finished our last video on chapter 20. And Rudy and I have just talked about there are a lot of important things that are like guardrails for life in between chapter 20 and 24. But they're also really hard to explain and maybe not as interesting to people today. So we're skipping to chapter 24, and we're going to pull some passages out of 24 through 28 in this session. This is Rudy's day off. We're going to pull some passages out and emphasize those. We'll finish up after another 7 videos, Deuteronomy, and then we're going to go to the Gospel of Luke. Got to give you an idea of where we're headed. So in chapter 24 we read, "You shall not withhold the wages of poor and needy laborers, neither other Israelites or aliens." Alien is not from space, but they're like we would call today immigrants, "who reside in your land in one of your towns. You shall pay them their wages daily before sunset, because they're poor. Their livelihood depends on them. Otherwise they might cry to the Lord against you, and you would incur guilt." Rudy, you want to start off, give us some ideas about that?
Well, really the chapters that are very repetitious, this is a repetitious section here too, because really God is continually reminding us to take care of the poor and the weak of society, and because they're always going to be there. And this is just another passage that talks about that. You know, what you said about guardrails is really the truth. God is setting up laws for society, and when he says not to go to the right or to the left, that's really what he's talking about. These guardrails, you have to live in the middle of this.
Right.
And they seem to our ears and our heart today to be a little bit too harsh, but the beginning of the way to adhere to any law is it has to be that way. And through the centuries, the rabbis have used these laws to draw even more explicit lines internally for the individuals, because you have to keep the Lord in the center of your mind. That's why the holidays and knowing where your firstborns are, knowing where the first fruits are, knowing what year it is, it's so that you're centered on him, because you have to know the time that you're living in. And I think that makes it a little easier to understand than just one law after another.
I agree. So I brought my little blank white tablet here because on a couple of videos we're going to do this week, I'm going to make some notes. Well, if someone were to give me this and say, "Now, Bob, give us a 3-point plan or a 5-point plan on what to do about the poor," it would still be blank. I don't have all the answers. What I do know is that God cares about the poor. And when we take advantage of the poor, when we do that, then they are not unnoticed by God. Their cry and their pain and their difficulty goes to the Lord. Similar to, I go back to the Exodus when the children of God were enslaved, and God said he heard their cry. They maybe didn't know how to pray at that time. They were maybe so beat down in their slavery they didn't know how to pray, but they could cry. And O. Housby, one of my favorite authors on prayer, says one of the most compelling prayers is a cry. And he goes to a baby. A little baby doesn't know how to speak, a little baby doesn't know how to formulate words, but the baby knows how to cry, and mom comes running. So he gives us this. Let's move on.
Okay.
So it tells parents, verse 16, parents shall not be put to death for their children, nor children to death for their parents. For only their crimes may, we have a fly in here, by the way, Rudy.
I know.
So if you see us waving, we're not trying to hit each other. At any rate, so they shall not be put to death for their own parents, or for the children. I didn't read that very well. I got too interested in the fly. Can I talk for a moment about that?
Sure.
I'll turn it to you. I've been influenced by William Glasser. I studied him when I was in seminary. He's a counselor. And Glasser talked about responsibility. And he talked about how people, when they take responsibility for their life, then they're on the road to healing. And there's lots of great stories about that. On the other hand, when you don't take responsibility, when you blame somebody else, when you're the victim, you've given away your power to change. And so I see this as a God saying to families, there is responsibility. You need to, parents, take responsibility for your behavior. Children, take responsibility for your behavior. Now, there's probably more than that. Why don't you comment real quick on that?
Well, I agree with the author that you're talking about. Responsibility is one of the things that I think God has put in this existence so that we understand meaning. Mm-hmm. If we weren't responsible and to do anything, we wouldn't have to consider how to do it. And with that is really one of the keys that the Lord unlocks to the meaning of your life. So I agree with taking responsibility.
Okay, let's move. Let's get one more. So you'll not deprive a resident alien, that would be like an immigrant in our terminology today, or an orphan of justice. You shall not take a widow's garment in pledge. Remember, you were a slave in Egypt, and the Lord your God redeemed you. Therefore, I command you to do this. And then he goes on and talks about when you're harvesting your crops, leave some out there so these disadvantaged people can come and get some.
Right. The corners of the field were not to be harvested. There was not to be a second harvest of fruit trees. Whatever was harvested in the beginning, that belonged to the landowner. The rest of it belonged to the poor of society.
Right. So Rudy's a businessman, and as a businessman, you can talk about maximizing profits. You also can talk about blessing your employees.
Right, and I don't know how well I do either one, but it has always been one of my business practices to. It doesn't all belong to the owner.
Yeah.
And there has to be some kind of equality or equity between workers and profits. And I think we in America kind of lost our way in that.
Yeah. So you don't have a yacht, and you don't have a private jet.
No, I don't.
And you're not taking space flights, but you do pay your workers well.
I do.
Yeah.
And but there, the thing is it's actually the right thing to do. I mean, you can try to make yourself sound better than you actually are, but it's been the right thing to do my whole life.
Right. You're right. So those are some ideas from chapter 24. We're going to go tomorrow to chapter 26. So thank you so much, Rudy. Thank you. This is your day off. And we do all these on his day off. And we thank you all very much. God bless you.